My name is Kathy, a 40-year-old office worker who had been doing clerical work. I was living with my husband, Bob, who is 3 years older and works at the same company, but we don't have any children. We've been married for 10 years. As I got married at the age of 30, I had a sense of urgency about starting a family right from the beginning. Both of us wanted to have children. While there's almost no biological clock for my husband being a man, I thought my limit was 35. I'm not particularly strong physically, so I wanted to get through childbirth and parenting while I had the energy. However, my wish did not come true. Bob and I started trying to conceive immediately after our wedding, but there were no signs of pregnancy, so we decided to get tested at an obstetrics and gynecology clinic. The results showed that I had some problems which made it hard for me to get pregnant. It wasn't like I couldn't get pregnant at all, but the odds were very low, and I was told it would be difficult. Bob was disappointed and said, "Can't I become a father?" Seeing him like that, I couldn't say anything. We continued to try for a child with a slim hope, but in the end, no child came to us. I tried to cheer up my downcast husband by saying, "It's not the end of the world. Let's enjoy our life together as a couple." He also seemed resigned, saying, "Yeah, there's nothing we can do about it, so I guess just go with the flow." However, gradually, Bob began to change. When we were walking around town and saw a family with children, he would say, "If I had a kid, I wonder if I would be enjoying a family outing like that on my weekends." And sigh. When we were invited to a coworker's house and saw their children, he would say things like, "You're so lucky to have kids," and seemed envious. I wondered if he couldn't give up on having a child deep down, and I felt uncomfortable. And then Bob began to grow cold towards me. When we were trying to conceive, he had been very proactive in helping out with the housework, saying that I shouldn't overdo it because it could affect my ability to get pregnant. He would always be the first to say, "I'll carry that," when something heavy needed lifting, and he was a kind husband who cared for me. On weekends, he would always take over the household chores, saying that I do them during the week. But once he knew I couldn't have a child, he stopped doing anything. I'm tired and housework is a wife's job, right? With that, he spends his weekends just lazing around. He was either sleeping or playing with his smartphone. Suddenly, I had more to do, and my health began to deteriorate. When I had a fever or stomach ache, he would say, "I don't know, do it yourself." And he wouldn't even take care of me. I couldn't say anything to him. After all, it was true that I was the reason it was hard for us to have a child. I wondered if I should get a divorce. It was just then, when I thought things were going well, Bob was transferred. Apparently, he was chosen for a big project at one of the affiliated companies. The subsidiary was across the state line, so he ended up moving for work. I naturally thought I had to go with him, but he said, "You don't need to come. I'll be going alone." Hearing those words, I took some time to think. Maybe he was just frustrated and cold towards me because I couldn't bear a child. Living separately for a while might help calm his feelings and we might return to our peaceful relationship. I agreed, saying, "All right, I'll stay here. Take care." I saw him off. After he was transferred, he would return home only about once a month. Even when he returned, he would soon say he was busy and had to go back. That was usual. But I was happy to see him, even for a short time, because if he really disliked me, he wouldn't come back. After Bob went alone, he began to change gradually. At first, he was the same as always, but as time passed, he became kinder. He would bring me souvenirs saying, "I bought something for you, enjoy." Or he would go shopping with me despite having limited time. He would check up on me asking, "Is there anything troubling you?" I completely thought he had returned to his kind self. Initially, his work assignment was for 1 year, but he ended up staying there for 2 years. The project's schedule was significantly delayed. By the time the second year of his assignment came around, he stopped making any remarks about me not being able to have children when he saw families with children in town. Rather, he said, "We couldn't have children together, but I've given up on it." I was relieved to hear that he had given up. 2 years later, he completed his work assignment and returned home to me. "Welcome back. You must be tired." "I'm home. Finally, we can live together." With such calm exchanges, we resumed living together. But those peaceful days quickly crumbled. After returning, he told me something. There's a young girl in my family who had a baby before getting married. She says she can't raise it by herself because she's too young. Would you be open to us adopting the child? He suddenly proposed. Taken aback by the sudden proposition, I asked, "What's going on?" To which he said, "We couldn't have a child after all. I'm suggesting we adopt this child and raise it as our own." Overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events, I said, "Let me think about it," and ended the conversation, but I felt something was off about his story. His family lived far away and we didn't have much contact with his parents. Our relationship was so distant that we only exchanged Christmas cards once a year. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, so I didn't know his relatives well. Reluctantly considering adopting a child from someone I hardly knew, I told Bob, "Could I meet the child's parents? I'd like to know what kind of people they are." But he firmly refused, saying, "Why does it matter who the parents are? Why are you so interested in that?" "I think it's important to know who the parents are. I want to hear the detailed reasons why they can't raise the child, and first of all, what happened to the child's father." When I pressed him, he flared up and said, "The father ran away, I heard. Stop snooping around about the parents." Being told you suddenly take in a child of a complete stranger, you don't just say, "Sure, why not?" "What on earth are you thinking?" I couldn't help but respond in a harsh tone. Then he shouted, "Enough! If you refuse to take the child in, it's over between us. Get out, right now." I felt as if I had heard his true intentions in those words. He wanted a child at any cost. My existence didn't matter to him. That's what I came to believe. I also felt I had reached my limit. "All right, I'll gather my things and leave then." I quickly packed up my belongings and left our home. That day, having nowhere to go, I found shelter in a motel near the train station. The divorce procedures with my husband went smoothly. We settled everything through a lawyer to avoid any disputes, and issues such as alimony, property division, and other matters ended without any hiccups. Feeling awkward working at the same company as him, I quit and found a new job. I was proficient in using a computer and also had administrative assistant certifications, so I managed to get hired at a small law firm. Adapting to my new workplace took a little time, but somehow I managed to work every day and lead a peaceful life. Having lived separately from my husband for 2 years, I had gotten used to coming home to an empty room. One day, after about a year of this life, my ex-husband appeared at my workplace, and he was holding a small child. Seeing me at the reception, he exclaimed, "Why are you here?" He was in shock. "Why wouldn't I be here? I work here. It's obvious, isn't it?" Upon hearing this, his face turned instantly pale. I was curious about the child he was holding, but first I escorted him to my supervising attorney, and there I learned a shocking truth. "Sir, I've been suspecting that this child, who was born a year ago, doesn't resemble me at all. I'm doubting if it's really mine," he said. "I see. If it turns out not to be your child, what do you plan on doing?" "Of course, I'll divorce my wife. But legally, you can only dispute the paternity of the child within a year of its birth. Even if you take a DNA test and find out that the child is not yours, you would still have to pay child support." "What? You must be joking." "I'm not. There have been such precedents in the Supreme Court as well." I was recording their conversation as a clerk, and while working, it dawned on me. He had cheated during our marriage and had a child from it. Considering the age of the child and the period of pregnancy, it was clear that the child was conceived around a year after he went on a business trip. And then I remembered that he had been unusually kind to me since then. I realized that he might have felt guilty. It seemed like his current wife was his junior from work. Each time he explained something, he would glance at me with a pale face. It was natural, after all. His ex-wife, whom he tried to leave with the child of his affair a year ago, was right there. In the end, he said, "All right, I will take a DNA test first and then reconsider." With these words, he left with a downcast look. I told my lawyer, Mr. Williams, about my divorce from last year when my ex-husband returned at the end of the day. Mr. Williams was quite surprised and asked, "You can claim alimony for infidelity within 2 years of discovery. What's your plan?" I said, "Of course I want it. I want to claim it from his mistress, too. Well, then let's start the procedures right away. Thank you very much. In the end, I claimed alimony through my lawyer, Mr. Williams, from my ex-husband and his current wife, who was his mistress. To prevent them from evading it, I sent the claim not only to their home but also to their workplaces and his in-laws' place. Then I got a call from my ex-husband right away. What's his claim about, huh? It's an alimony claim for your infidelity. We're already divorced. There's no way I'm paying alimony. That's not true. You can claim alimony for infidelity within 2 years of its discovery. We divorced a year ago, and your infidelity just came to light, so it's well within the claim period. At that point, a woman's voice I didn't recognize told him to change, and she took the phone. Hello? What's with this claim? Caught off guard by her sudden outburst, I asked, Who am I speaking with? I'm his wife. Take back at least my part of this claim. But it's only natural to claim alimony when I've been cheated on. Listen here, he said he was single. I thought he was single. So I went out with him. I didn't know he had a wife back then. I don't care about that. Even if he lied about being single, the fact that you had an affair with my husband doesn't change. I'll take a neat $20,000 from each of you. Our child will need money as they grow. There's no way we can afford such a huge amount of $40,000. That's not my problem. You're working too, and he's in a decently high position, so I don't think there's a financial issue. You know, because you sent that claim, he got demoted and had a pay cut, and I got downgraded from a full-time employee to a part-time one, and my income dropped. We can't afford to pay such a huge amount, she said, hysterical. Well, then ask your parents to cover it. I won't back down one bit. I absolutely won't pay. I'm not paying, she shouted, and he came back on the phone. Just as my wife explained, we are going to be in a tough financial situation. Could you please drop the claim? No, I absolutely won't drop it. By the way, let me tell you something good since we're at it, I said to him. What's that? Do you remember we had a fertility test a few years ago? Oh, yeah, we did. Although it turned out that I had a problem, actually, the test results showed that you also had a problem. What? You're kidding, right? It's true. It's true that I had a problem, but you did too. But at that time, I was shocked and didn't want to hurt you, so I kept it a secret. I still have the paper with the test results. Want me to send it to you? When I said that, he muttered, It's a lie. It's a lie. Probably the shock had him tuning out everything else. Truth be told, the doctor at that time did say there was indeed a significant issue on my end, but my husband Bob also had his fair share of problems. The doctor told me, both of you have issues, so it might be tough to have a child. It's not just your issue, Kathy, so don't take it all on yourself. When Bob heard that there was a problem on my end, he was so shocked that he ran out of the doctor's office without hearing the whole story. I was going to keep this fact a secret, but I decided there was no need to hide it anymore, so I told him just now. He muttered, That's a lie. That's definitely a lie. To him, I said, All right, let's leave it at that. I'm busy. And I hung up the phone. After that, I managed to get exactly $20,000 in total for emotional distress from each of them. $40,000 in total. She didn't want to pay, so it seems Bob took on the entire burden. Afterwards, it appears Bob did have the child undergo a DNA test. Turns out the child is not his, just as he feared. Apparently, he's considering divorcing with his wife, but since he'll have to pay child support and emotional distress compensation to her, he's forced to continue his reluctant marriage with his current wife, who was his affair partner, as he doesn't even have the financial leeway due to his demotion. The reason he wanted me to raise his child with his affair partner, it turns out, was because the affair partner is quite a strong-willed woman. He told me himself, when he came to pay the emotional distress compensation, that if he had custody of the child, he planned to find some excuse to break up with her. Recently, his relationship with his wife has become strained, and the atmosphere at home is tense. At work, everyone looks down on them as the adulterous couple, and he seems to be having a tough time. As for me, I'm completely used to my single life and living peacefully. I have plans to go on a trip with my friends during the next long holiday. Even though I'm alone now, my days are fulfilling with work and socializing with friends.
My name is Emma. I come from what you'd call a single-parent household. When I was a child, my father passed away, and since then, my mom has been raising me on her own. I've never felt sad about being part of a single-parent family. Although I couldn't spend much time with my hardworking mom, I genuinely admired her as a woman, as she labored tirelessly to maintain the architectural design firm she and my father had started. I aspire to be a woman like my mom, a go-getter in the professional world. However, one day, a terrible event occurred that trampled on my admiration. My boyfriend David is 3 years older than me, whom I met at a social gathering during college. His family is quite wealthy, and he himself managed to land a job at a bank through his connections. He's been working as an elite banker. Especially since we started dating, he's been very generous, showering me with gifts and taking me to fancy restaurants. He can be a bit indecisive at times, but he's kind and a wonderful guy. Recently, David and I talked about our marriage. I just graduated college this spring and started working, so getting married to David right away seems difficult. Plus, I still want some time for myself. But we both agreed that it would be nice to become a family together in the not-so-distant future. So today, I'm meeting David's parents, who will be my future family. In order to report our intentions to marry and to say hello, I'm visiting his parents' home for the first time. To make a good impression on his affluent middle-aged parents, I put a lot of effort into my outfit, hairstyle, and makeup to look charming, yet natural. I hope to be recognized by his parents as a woman suitable for David. With these thoughts in mind, I head towards the front door to leave the house. Mom, I'm heading out. I'm going to visit David's house today. Oh, right. Make sure to be polite. My mom, who's working from home today, looks up from computer and said, I know, see you later. I leave the house, feeling excited. After taking a train and a bus, I arrive at David's house in the neighboring town. It's a huge house, just like out of a fairy tale. I had David confirm his parents' favorite cake shop beforehand, and I bought a cake there. I ring the doorbell of his house. Ah, Emma, we've been expecting you. Welcome. David greets me with a gentle smile, and I step into his house. When I'm shown into the living room, I realize even more how spacious and grand the house is. Not just the size of the house, but also the interior decor is so elegant and upscale that I can't help but feel the financial power of David's father, an executive at a major bank. Nice to meet you. My name is Emma. I am slightly intimidated by the difference in the grandeur between this house and mine, but still, I smile and bow my head to greet them. Welcome, Emma. We're pleased to meet you. Please have a seat. I'll prepare some tea, so please wait a moment. Emma, I'm David's father. Welcome to our home. Please make yourself comfortable. David's parents are kind people, just like I imagined. They seem to be the perfect family in a fairy tale world. We started our conversation over a lovely aromatic tea, accompanied by the cake I had brought. His mother was a great talker, and his father was a good listener, and David, who occasionally interjected, while nodding along to my stories. I thought this harmonious time would last forever. But the moment the topic of my family came up, the atmosphere changed drastically. So, you lost your father at the age of 5, and then your mother raised you alone, Emma? She must be a wonderful woman. I respect her as a fellow mother. The fact that you've become such a wonderful woman is a testament to your mother's upbringing. We need to learn from her as parents. Yes, my mother is indeed my role model, I replied. They were praising both my mother and me, and I thought we could have a good relationship with his family. But just when I thought so, David's mother changed the tone. However, she started, coming from a single-parent household and being self-employed, I'm afraid it's not quite suitable for you to become David's wife. With these words, David's father silently nodded in agreement. Oh, well, I was shocked. They had just praised me, and now they were using the word unsuitable. I didn't know what to say and instinctively turned to David. Mom, Dad, not this again. What does it matter, her family situation? It's a minor fact. David defended me, but his parents softly denied whatever he said. No matter the reason, we can't trust a family with only one parent. We'd be troubled if we were to ask to lend money because of financial difficulties. David's father started making a disgusted face, imagining an unfounded scenario where we would ask him for money. Besides, it's not common for a single mother to be able to send her daughter to college. It makes us suspicious if there was another man's support involved. We can't accept a loose woman as a family member. Our family has been bankers since my grandfather's time. David's mother spoke ill of my mother, whom she had never met or even seen. Bankers value trust above all else, you know. Their words, which were not outright slander, hurt even more. David tried to fight back, but it ended with him losing the argument, leaving me out while the three of them argued. We can tolerate you dating her just for fun, but you need to rethink about marrying her. The lifestyle levels are too different between you and this girl. I think you'll end up breaking up due to differences eventually. David couldn't say anything back. He just silently listened to his parents. Finally, he turned to me. With his head bowed, he said, "I'm sorry, Emma. I can't marry you after all." What? I'm from a single-parent family, but do I have to give up marrying you for that reason? I don't want to say this either. Please, don't blame me. You knew about my family situation from a long time ago, didn't you? You even met my mother. Do you also think that my family and I are unsuitable for your family? David, who was usually indecisive in times like this, said nothing. But I think his silence was the clearest answer. He must have thought that marrying me wouldn't be a good match, just like his parents said. I felt sad. I never thought that not only his family, but even David would reject me just because I come from a single-parent household. Emma, please, just go home, he finally said with his strained voice. Honestly, I didn't want to stay here a second longer either. I'm leaving. I'm sorry for the trouble, I said, even though no one tried to stop me. They probably felt relieved that I left. With tears streaming down my face, I retraced my steps and went straight back home. When I got home, my mother noticed my tear-streaked face and asked me what happened. There was no point in lying to her. She knew where I had been and what I was doing. It felt like I was dishonoring my mother's way of life, and I really didn't want to tell her, but I told her everything. As expected, my mother was infuriated by the harsh treatment I had received. Well, so that's the kind of family they are. It seems like your boyfriend David was just going along with them. Certainly, a marriage with a guy like that wouldn't last long, so I think it's better not to marry him, she said. Mom, it must have been tough. You did well. Despite the terrible things she herself had been told, my mother still worried about me and hugged me. Then she asked me about David's father's job as a banker. Which bank does David's father work for? I remember the name of the bank clearly, as David often bragged about it. When I told her, she seemed to understand something. Emma, your mom might not earn a lot and you don't have a father in the house. It's okay to feel unlucky about that. But remember, you should never feel embarrassed or inferior. After your father left, I raised you always believing this. So I will never forgive David and his family, she said. Even though I had cried my eyes out on the way home, tears began to well up again. My mother's words reminded me of something important. I love my mother very much. I admire her hard work, and I want to be just like her someday. It's ridiculous to deny my admiration for her, for the sake of David and his family, who trampled on it for such a trivial reason. The next day, my mother said to me, I checked, and as I thought, our company does have dealings with David's father's bank. I don't want to deal with a bank where the father of a man who dumped my daughter so harshly works, so I'm going to cancel the contract. I'll explain the whole situation. I don't know what will happen, but if they say trust is important, let's make sure they understand that they no longer have my trust. She called the bank right when it opened, bypassed the loan officer, and asked for the branch manager. Branch manager? We're terminating our dealings with you. Yes, I'm sorry it's so sudden, but it seems that one of your officers has severely mistreated my daughter. If you're willing to hear the details, I'd be happy to come and explain it personally. What do you say? I heard my mother's conversation just before I went to work. I knew she was going to terminate the contract, but I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't understand what it meant until a few days later, when I got a call from David, asking me to meet him at a nearby park. David and his parents were at the park. His parents glared at me. David asked me in a troubled voice. My dad suddenly got fired, and when I asked why, they said it was because of my girlfriend. What on earth have you done, Emma? In those words, I understood everything. What it means to sever a contract, what it means for a banker to lose trust. It all became clear to me. If someone who lends and borrows money based on trust loses that trust, they essentially lose their livelihood. If there's a cause that erodes the vital trust from customers, it must be eliminated. In other words, it means his father was expelled from the company as the root of all evils that undermine trust. What I discovered later was that David and his father, just like they did with me, looked down on customers as they were poor, causing all sorts of trouble. It seemed it was only a matter of time before they would be let go. The final straw was just a call from my mother. This wasn't something I accomplished through my own strength. I don't possess such power, but it was something my family did for me. I should tell him this, proudly and confidently. You insulted my mother, so she retaliated with her power. What? There's no way a company run by the parents of a poor girl like you could have enough influence to get me fired just by filing a complaint. Indeed, the company run in my parents' name isn't that large. But my mother's influence isn't limited to just one design office she runs. Even if she isn't directly involved in management, she's in a position to influence companies. Now, I can fully understand the meaning of all the transactions my mother had with the bank at the time. I'm sure it's something like this. My mom's company itself indeed isn't large. However, my mom is also registered as a non-executive director in several companies my grandfather runs. So, what it means to have enough influence over you guys is that all contracts with my grandfather's companies were also terminated. I listed a few of the companies my grandfather manages. The color drained from his father's face quickly. That's ridiculous. There's nothing strange about it. After all, he's my grandfather, right? Why would he want to deal with a bank that disrespected his granddaughter and daughter? It seemed they finally understood why they were fired. Suddenly, their attitude completely changed. They fell to their knees on the spot, pressing their foreheads to the ground and sobbing. But even with such a spectacle in front of me, I could only think of them as pitiful. David clung to me, begging, "Emma, I'm sorry for all the things. I was truly serious about wanting to marry you. I just thought I wanted you to go home for a while because my parents were being difficult." Lining up such lame excuses, it was as if he was trying to save himself, at least. But I've given up on him too. I shrugged off his feeble arm and told him, "My mom is amazing, isn't she? She's my role model. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Someone who would disrespect her. I really hate you now. I'm going home because my mom worries. Goodbye, and please never contact me again." Devoid of the strength chasing after me, he could only silently watch me leave, kneeling in the same pose as his parents. After that, his family, unemployed all of a sudden, seemed unable to change their standard of living all at once. They started selling off their cars and luxury goods, one after another, and in the end, they even had to let go of their house. Hearing the story that my mother and grandfather had gathered through the bank, I felt deep down that I dodged a bullet by not marrying that man. He will likely continue to live burdened with his half-baked pride and continue to struggle financially. I found myself wishing he would learn to live within his means, and my mother and I shared a laugh over this. As for me, I just start to live in the working society. There is more things that I can't do than can. But I've learned a lot from this experience. Of course, I want to sharpen my judgment when it comes to choosing partner, but I also want to become stronger myself. Even so, my goal remains unchanged. I want to be a cool working woman like my mother. To protect and support my family like my mom, I want to work hard every day to become a strong woman.
I can't stand the cold. My body aches. I woke up from the chills and intense pain in my joints. A stark white square room. Where am I? There's an IV tube extending from my arm. It looks like a hospital. Someone is looking down at me with concern. Catherine, are you okay? I found you collapsed at home, so I called an ambulance. When I squint, I can see that it's my mother. Hearing her voice, I feel relieved. Mom, thank you. You saved me. As I respond, my mother presses her fingers to the corners of her eyes. It seems I've worried her a lot. My 4-year-old daughter is tightly holding my hand. Poor thing. Her eyes are filled with tears. How did things come to this? I remember the hellish days. I'm Catherine, a 35-year-old stay-at-home mom. My husband Bob and I got married after dating at work. Initially, it was just the two of us living together. And a year later, our daughter Anna was born, and we were happy. But then, my mother-in-law fell ill and needed care, so we were asked to move in with Bob's family. My mother-in-law was kind, and I got along well with her. But with caregiving came the need to quit my job. As I hesitated, Bob pleaded with me, promising to help and involve his sister who lived alone in a nearby apartment. So I agreed, feeling it was impossible to abandon my mother-in-law. I quit my job to take care of her. I lent her my shoulder when she needed to go to the bathroom, walked slowly while supporting her body, and made porridge, soft-cooked dishes, and fruit juice for her when her appetite waned. I wiped her body with warm towels. To keep her spirits up, I carried Anna on my back and took my mother-in-law out for walks in her wheelchair, trying to make her life as comfortable as possible. It was hard to watch my mother-in-law's health deteriorate as she battled her illness. Bob, who had said he would help with caregiving, seemed to have no intention of doing so and left everything to me. His sister Rachel didn't even show her face. I felt deceived, but I had already quit my job, and I couldn't just leave my mother-in-law as she was. So I just endured the situation. Catherine, thank you. You're treating me better than my own daughter. I really appreciate it. My mother-in-law, a person of good character, repeatedly expressed her gratitude to me. About 6 months into this lifestyle, Rachel, who was working at a company, suddenly announced that she would move in with us. I'm worried about Mom, so I'll live here and take care of her too, she said. I thought it would be helpful if Rachel assisted, as I also had to care for young Anna. But that was naive of me. Mom, how are you feeling? Rachel would ask my mother-in-law, but she didn't actually help with her care. Preparing meals, doing laundry, cleaning, and even taking care of Rachel's share of the housework on top of my already busy schedule made my life even more hectic. Rachel didn't help with my mother-in-law's care, meal preparation, dishwashing, laundry, or cleaning. She seemed to think of me as nothing more than a convenient maid. And on top of that, she would criticize me, saying things like, Catherine, you need to give Mom more nutritious food. She won't get better eating soft food like this. My mother-in-law's body was weak, and she could only tolerate soft food. I wanted her to get some nutrition, so I served tenderly cooked meat and vegetables. Only those who take care of her would understand that. In my mind, I tell my sister-in-law Rachel to try making it herself just once. I held back from actually saying it because it would lead to a fight. That only made Rachel more arrogant. The child's crying is so annoying. I can't get a good night's sleep. Can't you make her stop? You're a failure as a mother. She complains to me every day. My daughter Anna has sensitive skin and is prone to rashes, so she sometimes cries at night due to the itchiness. I apply the medicine prescribed by the doctor, but it doesn't seem to work very well. Eventually, even my husband started saying, "Aren't you going to prepare some snacks for my drinks? Rachel and I work outside, so you can relax at home. How about showing some gratitude?" His sister Rachel is much younger, and he's always been indulgent with her. I thought he was a bit of a siscon, but Rachel doesn't contribute anything to the household expenses, living off of us for food and utilities. So his argument doesn't make sense. Rachel works as an employee, but brand name bags and clothes are delivered to her every day. I doubt she can afford all of that with her income alone, and I wonder how she's doing it. If she has that much money, I wish she would contribute to the food expenses. But I guess she's living with us to save on rent, utilities, and food costs. My husband talks big, but he only puts $500 into the household budget and uses the rest for his personal spending. My mother-in-law gives us $500 from her pension, so we manage somehow, but we have to be very frugal. When I tell my husband about this situation, "You're just bad at managing money. Don't nag me about it. If you don't like it, leave," he yells at me. Only my mother-in-law, who hears the terrible words my husband throws at me, defends me. "Catherine is taking care of me every day and being so kind. That's a terrible way to speak to her." But my husband, "The patient should just accept the care quietly. Don't butt into our marital issues," he replied. I thought about going back to my parents' house, but I couldn't leave my mother-in-law behind. I couldn't imagine my husband or Rachel providing any care. Also, my father passed away early, so I grew up in a single-parent household with my mother. I didn't want to disappoint my mother, who was happy about my marriage. 3 years after I started taking care of my mother-in-law, she passed away peacefully, leaving me with the words, "Thank you." In addition to mourning her loss, the verbal abuse from my husband and Rachel continued. The household budget was now just the $500 my husband provided. But when I asked him for more, "It's your poor money management," he would only yell. I had to use the money I saved when I was working to make up for the shortfall. I had set aside the money for Anna's future education. But looking back, I was barely holding myself together at the time. So when my husband and Rachel blamed me, I felt like I was in the wrong and became more submissive. My husband would say, "You're useless at everything." And Rachel would add, "That's right. You can't even do housework properly, which was your only redeeming quality. There's no point in you being alive." To that, all I could say was, "I'm sorry. I'll be more careful from now on." Only my 4-year-old Anna stood up for me. "Mommy isn't useless. Don't say such terrible things." She started standing in front of me, spreading her arms as if to protect me. I think I was living solely for Anna, trying to stay strong for her. But I lost my appetite and kept losing weight. One day, I felt sluggish, shivering, and woke up. Couldn't get up, but had to make breakfast. Took my temperature. 104 degrees Fahrenheit? No way. Must be a mistake. Checked again. 104.8 degrees Fahrenheit. It was correct. I heard Bob yelling, "Are you still in bed? What about breakfast?" When I told him I had a fever, he said, "Don't use your fever as an excuse. Hurry up and make food," and dragged me out of bed by my hair. I could hear Rachel's footsteps approaching. "Hey, my blouse isn't ironed. What are you doing?" I desperately got up, made breakfast, and ironed the blouse. "Look at that miserable face so early in the morning." "Seriously, you're so useless." The two of them left for work, slamming the door behind them. "Mommy, are you okay?" Anna came to me, looking worried. "I'm fine, sweetie. You must be hungry, right?" I fed Anna some bread, took her to daycare, and came back home, collapsing on the sofa. I fell asleep right away. I woke up coughing violently. Before I knew it, it was evening. In a panic, I went to pick up Anna from daycare, and she was waiting there all alone. The teacher in charge said, "I was just about to call you since you were late. You don't look well. Are you okay?" But I couldn't afford to be pampered. I took Anna home and hurriedly prepared dinner. I couldn't go shopping, so I made do with what I had. When Bob and Rachel came home, they started yelling, "What is this disgusting-looking food? Is this what I get after working hard all day?" "It looks like pig slop. The mushy appearance is just like it." "I can't eat this." With that, Bob threw the food into the trash. "It's not fair. I wasn't feeling well, but I tried my best to make it." I snapped back, but it only made Bob angrier. He fetched a bucket of water and splashed it on me. "You said you have a fever, right? This should cool you down. Rachel, We don't have to eat this terrible food. Let's go out to eat. Hearing that, Rachel happily agreed. Yay! We get to eat something delicious today! And the two of them left together. Anna, worried, brought me a towel. Mommy, are you cold? Daddy is so mean. While saying that, she wiped my wet face with her tiny hands. Thank you, Anna. And then, just like that, my consciousness began to fade. I can't stand the cold. My body hurts. I woke up shivering and in pain all over my body. A completely white square room? Where am I? There's an IV tube extending from my arm. It seems like a hospital. Someone is looking down at me with concern from above. Catherine, are you okay? I found you collapsed at home and called an ambulance. Squinting, I realized it was my mother. Hearing her voice, I felt relieved. Mom, thank you. You saved me. As I replied, my mother pressed her fingers to the corner of her eyes. It seems I had caused her a lot of worry. My daughter Anna tightly grasped my hand. Her eyes were filled with tears. But Mom, why did you come home? You rarely come, right? When I asked, Anna called me. She was crying, saying, Grandma, help! Mom won't wake up, my mother said. So it was Anna who saved me. Thank you, Anna. You called Grandma all by yourself. That's great. As I praised her, Anna remembered what she practiced with Mom. I did great, didn't I? She seemed happy. We had practiced how to call Grandma in case of an emergency many times. We had set up speed dial, so it was easy to call, but I never thought it would save me. I'm a failure as a mother for making my 4-year-old worry. I must become stronger for her, I vowed in my heart. Still, why did you endure until you got pneumonia? You were soaking wet, too, my mother asked, and I decided to tell her everything. As I finished speaking, my mother's face trembled with anger. Her lips tightly pressed together. Catherine, don't give up. Let's think carefully about what to do next and make them realize. The next day, Bob barged into my hospital room. Hey, Catherine, what's the meaning of calling the company? Just because of a fever? I answered calmly. You left me drenched after pouring water on me when I had a fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Didn't you? I just reported that to the company. What? Are you out of your mind because of the fever? What's with the attitude? Bob's expression became even more menacing, but I won't back down. I'm fed up with you using me as a housekeeper and ignoring me even when I'm sick. As I retorted, Don't joke around. You think you can talk like that to your husband and get away with it? He seemed ready to grab me at any moment. You always talk to my precious daughter like that, don't you? My mother spoke up from behind. Ah, mother-in-law, you're here. No, it's just a regular marital quarrel. Bob hastily tried to cover up. Expecting her to live on $500 a month and do housework even when she has a fever. What a treatment for a wife who took care of your mother. My mother continued without backing down. At that moment, my sister-in-law burst into the room. Hey, stupid wife! You told our company I got pneumonia because of my abusive sister-in-law, didn't you? It was me who called. It's the truth, isn't it? My mother said. My sister-in-law began to scream with a red face. I had a wealthy colleague who might have proposed to me, but he turned me down for dating. What are you going to do about it? She said, unable to contain her anger. Well, you have a ton of overdue bills, don't you? Aren't you almost bankrupt? You may want to marry someone and saddle them with your debt, but that's not right, I replied, hitting a nerve as she glared at me. You better be prepared since it's your fault that Rachel and I were humiliated at work. I used to be intimidated by such remarks, but now I could calmly look at Bob and argue back. I intend to divorce you. I don't need to prepare for anything since we're cutting ties, I told him. Bob's face turned red, and his fists trembled with anger. Seeing his reaction, my mother sternly said, I'll take in my daughter and granddaughter. I'll demand proper compensation for the pain you caused my daughter, as well as child support for Anna. I can't believe I didn't realize you were such a terrible man. You old hag. If you show weakness, you'll just take advantage of it. I'll make you suffer, Bob shouted, raising his fist to threaten my mother. At that moment, someone from behind said, That's quite an aggressive way to talk. Bob's face paled as he saw who it was. Mr. President, what brings you here? The one who appeared was the president of the company where Bob and I used to work. Actually, he was a close friend of my late father, and he reached out to me when my father passed away, helping me out in various ways since then. When I consulted him about Bob, he immediately stepped in. I heard everything you said to your wife and mother-in-law in the hallway. I'm disappointed in you. I'll reconsider how you're treated at the company from now on. You should be the one to prepare yourself. What? Bob dropped his shoulders and hung his head. After that, Bob and I divorced, and I was able to cut ties with my sister-in-law, who treated me like a maid. I was glad to receive a $30,000 settlement and a $100,000 lump sum child support payment. Bob had only given me a small amount of living expenses, so he had saved up some money, but now he had to give it all to me. 6 months later, Bob contacted me, asking to reconcile, but I firmly refused. According to Bob, Rachel had become bankrupt due to her extravagant shopping and was desperately repaying debts while working at night, having quit her job. Bob was transferred to a rural area, but his high pride couldn't accept it, and he quit the company. He is now struggling to make ends meet with multiple part-time jobs, and as neither Bob nor Rachel do any housework, their home has become cluttered and a garbage house, with complaints from the neighbors. It's not my problem that he wants me to come back and fix things. I am living peacefully and happily with my mother and Anna. The president of my former company, who had helped me, invited me to work there again, so I'm thinking of rejoining. From now on, I want to live my life firmly for Anna's sake.
I'm Karen, in my 40s. I lived with my husband Nick and our daughter Sophia, but my father-in-law, now in his 90s, asked us to move in. Nick has a brother, but he's a traveling worker. His situation is uncertain as to when he'll be able to return home, so the talk turned to us. My in-laws' house is 3 stations away, and we've been helping them with hospital visits, but due to their age, they asked us to move in for emergencies. When my father-in-law consulted us, Nick looked a bit troubled. His mother favored his older brother a lot and used to slander Nick, saying, "Your brother is so smart, why are you such a failure? Your brother will inherit this house, you should find a job and leave." I'm not sure if my father-in-law knew about this, but he said, "Your mom is looking forward to living with you guys too." When Nick consulted with his brother, he seemed relieved and left everything to us, saying, "It would help if you guys could move in." To be honest, I don't like my brother-in-law. He has a son the same age as my daughter Sophia, but he always compares them and looks down on my daughter. During high school entrance exams, despite not much difference, he looked down my daughter for aiming at a high school with a slightly lower score while boasting about his son aiming at a higher one. This happened over the New Year's holiday, just a few months before the exam. In the end, his son didn't get into the school he wanted, but when he decided to go to a private school, he looked down on us saying, "Poor people can only go to public schools, haha." Every time we gathered together for the new year, he boasted, "I'm the eldest son, I'll inherit this house." But now he completely left everything to us. However, since we got my brother-in-law's approval and my father-in-law's eager request, we decided to accept the offer to move in. Originally, we planned to sell the place we were living in once our daughter Sophia starts college and buy a new one for just the 2 of us, my husband Nick and me. But we decided to think of this move as just a year ahead of our schedule. Upon moving in, just as my father-in-law had said, my mother-in-law welcomed our family warmly. She gave the largest room to us, the next largest room to Sophia, and even offered to clean all the areas except for our room herself. When she said, "We'll do our laundry ourselves, but could you please take care of the meals for us?" I was more than happy since I was expecting that I would have to handle everything. Sophia only has 1 more year until college entrance exams. She was a little nervous about the change of environment, but she was relieved to get a decent room. She seemed pleased to be able to use a larger room than before. We decided to pay a few $100s in rent each month and split the cost of utilities and food. The cohabitation started in a much better atmosphere than I had expected. Nick seemed relieved, but after a few months, things started to change slowly. That day was when my mother-in-law was supposed to go to the hospital. Since I didn't know when I would be able to come back, she said, and she asked me to clean and do the laundry. I had just had a day off from my part-time job, so I accepted without thinking. However, when I went to the supermarket for groceries, I happened to see my mother-in-law. She was happily chatting with a friend at a cafe. At that time, I thought it was okay once in a while, but it became not just once in a while after that day. "I have to go to the clinic once a week, and I'll need you to take care of the cleaning and laundry every time." My mother-in-law says this apologetically, but I'm skeptical about whether she's really going to the clinic. She eats 3 meals a day and snacks in between. She is lively every day, sleeps well, and from my point of view, she seems healthy. But I decided to turn a blind eye because I would rather avoid ruining our relationship. I was preparing from the beginning that I would probably end up doing everything, and doing this once a week seemed not a big deal. However, after accepting this, my mother-in-law's request started to escalate. What was once a week became twice a week, then thrice, and on top of that, she said, "Could you please not move the trash can in our room? It's in the best spot right here. I just can't get enough energy going in the morning from your breakfast. I really need more healthier breakfast. Ideally, I'd like at least 5 side dishes. I don't want you to wash that handkerchief with other items because it's important," she said, among other complaints about how I do housework. She even suggested, "Why don't you quit your part-time job? It doesn't look good. Then you could take care of all the housework." Making me do all of the housework and complaining about it is so scary. I brush it off by saying, "I'll think about it." I had some savings for buying a condo, so I figured I could just move out if I got fed up with it. So with that attitude, about half a year passed since we started living together, when suddenly my brother-in-law returned. My mother-in-law was delighted at the news of his sudden job transfer, and as soon as my brother-in-law came back, her attitude changed dramatically. We were kicked out of the room we were using on the day my brother-in-law came back. She said that because my brother-in-law was going to use the biggest room, we should all use my daughter's room. Thinking about my daughter, my husband rebelled, but they didn't take it seriously. We had to use one room for 3 people, but my brother-in-law's influence didn't end there. I was told to adjust the meals to my brother-in-law's taste, to hang his suits in a certain way. Furthermore, my mother-in-law's nagging got even worse. "Brother said he wants to eat food with a stronger flavor. I've always felt the same way, but your cooking is a lighter taste," she claimed. "You know, what brother hates most is being woken up by the vacuum cleaner, so please don't use the vacuum until brother has woken up." Every time it's always, "Brother likes this, brother doesn't like that," and it's like they're implying that everything my brother-in-law says is correct, joining in saying, "Yes, that's right." "My daughter-in-law and son won't be coming back. My son will be a university student starting next year. He says he's going to stay at that place until he graduates from high school." When my brother-in-law was saying this, my mother-in-law was nodding in agreement, saying, "That's right. Considering he has important exams coming up, it would be pitiful to change his environment." My daughter is in the same situation, isn't she? Despite that, we changed her environment twice, from living alone to a 3-person room, didn't we? Holding back my desire to complain, I quietly carried on with the housework, because I knew that if I complained, it would come back many times over. The last thing I need is for my brother-in-law, who has always looked down on my daughter, to shift his target from me to her. I kept holding back, but I felt like I was quickly reaching my limit. It was the time when I thought I couldn't handle it anymore. My brother-in-law, who had been drinking, started to fight with my husband. "As the eldest son, it's natural that I take over this place. When my wife and son come here, we'll take care of both dad and mom. You guys should get out of here quickly. Oh, you can leave right now if you want. Your wife, her cleaning is sloppy and her food is terrible. It's unbearable. Mom's still strong. We don't need your wife for housework. It's tiring to deal with your on-edge daughter too. I'd be so satisfied if you guys could leave now. Actually, we don't need you anymore. I'm the eldest son. Now that I'm back, you guys should leave ASAP." Behind my brother-in-law, who is proudly the eldest son, my mother-in-law agrees with him as usual. "Since your brother's wife is coming, we don't need your wife anymore. We only need a grandson, not a granddaughter. You're pitiful having a useless wife who can't cook, clean, or do laundry properly. You've always had a tough time. I actually wanted to live with your brothers. I just reluctantly agreed because your father said so. I never wanted to live with you at all." Inspired by my brother-in-law, my mother-in-law got carried away and began to say even more outrageous things. My husband, who is usually mild-mannered, seemed unable to bear it any longer. "Enough, I get it. We should leave, right? We'll leave. Happy now? Stop speaking ill of Karen and Sophia," he shouted. This surprised even me. I had never heard my husband raise his voice in anger before. Neither of them expected him to explode in such a way, quickly downplaying their behavior, saying, "We were just joking," or "Don't take it so seriously." But my husband disregarded their excuses and, without uttering a single word, started to make his exit. This shift in his demeanor truly unsettled them. They turned pale and began to cling to my husband, their faces filled with desperation. Their self-serving attitudes were astounding. It felt ridiculous, having tolerated their behavior up until this point. I was in the middle of cleaning up after dinner, but I dropped everything to stand by my husband's side. "We were tired of living with you. If we both want the same thing, it's just right. I'll be leaving soon. Please rest assured." My brother-in-law and mother-in-law were both slack-jawed, making fools of themselves. Even I, who had always been so loyal, was now standing up against them. They probably couldn't imagine this as people who always think about themselves. Even now, I cannot forget about their expressions. My bold stance was all thanks to my husband. To be honest, as soon as my brother-in-law returned 2 weeks ago, my husband started looking for a rental property. We didn't know when my mother-in-law might revert to her old ways, or when my brother-in-law might start harassing our daughter again. There were too many uncertainties, so we began preparations to be ready to move out at any moment. We felt truly sorry for our daughter having to change her surroundings so often, but it's better than staying here. We had a few places shortlisted, and by the next day, we had signed a lease for an available property and left our in-laws' place the following day. Afterwards, our daughter successfully got into college. She decided to live on her own, and we, as originally planned, bought a new apartment. It was a peaceful afternoon at the start of our new life when a call came in. The caller ID showed it was my mother-in-law. My husband was reluctant to answer, but when the incessant ringing was too much to bear, he finally picked up. We could hear the sound of my mother-in-law sniffling, possibly crying over the phone. "I'm sorry for what happened back then. I know an apology might not make up for it, but can we put it all behind us? I want to live with you all again. The truth is, something terrible has happened to my son. My son and I, we can't seem to manage living together anymore." This is what my mother-in-law had to say. My brother-in-law had an affair within the company, and when it was discovered, he was demoted. That's why his sudden transfer had been decided. It seems his salary has dropped significantly, but my mother-in-law, who was indulgent with my brother-in-law, had not been receiving rent or living expenses from him, so she was oblivious to his situation until now. My brother-in-law thought he could keep the truth from being discovered, but a single letter shattered his scheme. It was a letter of proof sent by his wife. My brother-in-law, under the impression that his affair was not known, had passed off his demotion as a transfer, but his wife knew everything and seemed to have sprung divorce on him as soon as their son started college. On top of the fact that it was already difficult to live on my brother-in-law's income alone, he was saddled with alimony and child support payments, pushing him into a situation where he had no choice but to go into debt. It seems that my mother-in-law wanted to rely on my brother-in-law after she finished using the money left by her husband, but my brother-in-law was demoted and the debt led to a divorce. She won't have anyone to rely on for housework and nursing care. That's why she asked for help. "Can't you at least return my husband to me?" my mother-in-law pleaded with a desperate voice. Yes, my father-in-law is currently living with us. My mother-in-law, who could not oppose to my father-in-law, used to hurl abuse at my husband when my father-in-law was not present. And when she would complain about me, she always made sure that my father-in-law was not around. However, once my brother-in-law moved back, she seemed to think it was okay if my brother-in-law was there, and she started complaining in front of my father-in-law as well. When my husband confessed to my father-in-law about my mother-in-law's past abusive behavior, my father-in-law, who had not known about it, apologized to my husband. "I'm sorry I didn't realize it sooner. And then I went ahead and suggested we all live together. Just do whatever you guys want." Those were my father-in-law's words, but my husband seemed to be worried about leaving him with my mother-in-law and brother-in-law. That's when I suggested that my father-in-law should move in with us. And so we ended up living together in the new house. Although my father-in-law was quite taken aback by my mother-in-law's behavior, he left her a decent amount of money, probably because of their long history together. Well, if he continued that life, he would have had it for a year. "Dad says he wants to live with us. We no longer intend to live with you, Mom, so don't start asking us for favors now." My husband quietly stated that and then hung up the phone. I would have liked him to say more, but given the significant damage already done, I decided it was good enough. According to what we later heard from my father-in-law, my mother-in-law apparently started working part-time at a convenience store despite her old age. As for my brother-in-law, he was unable to repay his debts with just his regular job and seemed to be working extra hours, even during the night and on his days off, sparing little time for sleep. They seemed to be enjoying their life of debt together. On the other hand, thanks to my father-in-law contributing half of the cost to our apartment, we have plenty of breathing room in our lifestyle. We are planning a trip with him to our daughter's place during the upcoming long weekend. We're looking forward to staying in a luxury hotel and seeing our daughter again after a long time.